remember when my trafficker first kidnapped me by gunpoint, I believed that my captivity was temporary.
Alright, I'm turning this off. You should vlog. On the last
Oh yeah, I think they're gonna keep adding.
Yeah, they're still taking stuff.
When there was no sun, when there was only night, I had to live, eat, breathe the night. See, I was told when I need to get up. I was told when I need to lay down. And you see, sun and laughter was not a part of that routine. I remember when my trafficker first kidnapped me by gunpoint, I believed that my captivity was temporary. I believed that I could escape and that I would run to the first police officer I saw and that I would tell him what happened to me. I remember I was staring at an officer's badge when he said to me, "Hey, what are you gonna do for me to keep me from locking you up, little lady?" It was then that I relearned the phrase, "Whatever you like." It was then that I realized that, you see, my pimp was right. There would be no justice for me. There would be no justice for those boys and little girls whose innocence have been robbed from them daily by adults while they're locked away as child prostitutes and we as a society threw away the key. I know that some of us have gotten lucky, like here in California. California, you see, in 2016, finally passed a law that said if you're under 18, you couldn't be locked up for prostitution. When there's a statutory rape law that says that if you're a child, you don't even have the ability to have consent. But what about every single one of those children before 2016? What about all of those other states and cities in this great nation that for generations have committed the atrocities of a society that has grown desensitized to empathy? I remember that the only solace that my survivor daughter received when she was locked up at 12 years old for prostitution, even though a grown man bought her and received a slap on the wrist, the only solace she had was that her juvie record would be temporary. Justice is supposed to be the American way, yet we as a society have thrown our own children away. But you see, I laugh because even the dark places where there is no sun is temporary. And I should know, because I was considered a nameless, faceless hoe, when instead I was a silenced victim with no hope. And I am lucky that I had a father to come look for me, except that father was in heaven and he brought with him a master key. And this Jesus, hey, I'm sorry, is the only reason that this caged bird sings. And what is my song? It is a message. It is a message to anyone whose business is in hurting children. Your power, too, like Me Too and Time's Up, is temporary. Thank you.
And our performers and our artists to take pain and turn it into education for us. To take pain, to take their own brutalization and use it to uplift us. And it's not fair. It's not fair unless we're going to do something about it. Unless we're going to do something about it. So this panel today is to prepare us to do something. We are blessed to be living in a moment where after 10,000 years of brutal oppression and subjugation of women, we are finally now seeing, I think, one of the most powerful risings of female power in the history of the species, and I'm proud to be alive at this moment. Taking place. One of the injustices that's happened is that inside, and I don't have any problem acknowledging this, but inside the criminal justice movement, women's issues have tended to get pushed to one side. When you talk about criminal justice, when you talk about prisons, when you talk about police brutality, it's almost always focused on the men. At the same time, a lot of the momentum so far with this new rising of women's voices, the women who have been the most silenced, the most brutalized, the most harassed, have not yet come to voice there. And so in 2018, you're going to see something extraordinary. You're going to see the criminal justice movement finally push forward the needs and voices of women, and you're going to see the women's movement lift up the needs and the voices of those women who are behind bars. And I guarantee you, you don't have to go have a PhD on intersectionality to know that when those two movements come together, change will happen in America, period. That's what's going to happen. So, we're going to have a panel discussion. Before we do, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Van Jones. I'm a founder of the Dream Corps, and I'm proud to be a founder of Cut 50, which is a campaign to cut crime and incarceration in half in all 50 states. And we are in support of the campaign for dignity for incarcerated women. I thought I knew as somebody who's been, I've been black my whole life almost. So it was about 6 months I was into YouTube real big. Other than that, I've been black my whole life. And I thought I knew about injustice and all those kind of things. I had no idea the level of brutality that's going on right now with women behind bars. And you're going to hear about it from this panel. But the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act is going to be a breakthrough piece of legislation. It was written by incarcerated women as a coalition of presently and formerly incarcerated women who wrote the legislation. It's been picked up by Kamala Harris and by Elizabeth Warren and by Cory Booker, and is now being endorsed by the American Conservative Union and other conservatives who also do not want to see women brutalized and mistreated. So we thought if we could get some relief to 12,000 women behind bars at the federal level, we'd be doing something extraordinary. Little did we know that the minute that the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act hit the table, women and advocates from across the country would say it's not just at the federal level. It's happening at the state level, it's happening at the county level, it's happening at the local level. And now we have almost a dozen states that have stepped up to try to push this movement forward. And so then, we thought that was pretty incredible, and then people of great note, people of great prominence began to hear about what was going on, and they have signed up in droves to be a part of this movement. And one of the big champions of this movement is a woman named Alicia Keys. And before we bring this panel on, she has produced a video along with Cut 50, and we're going to have that video. You're going to hear from Alicia Keys, and then you're going to hear from the panelists. You're going to understand how you can get involved to do something. It's very important to be here, to get educated, to get motivated, to get mobilized. But don't forget, most of the people, most of the artists who did this work shed a bunch of tears while they were doing it. Because they had to reach deep into their own pain or to other people's pain and to represent it. This is not just a show and tell. It's not a Kleenex and goosebump exhibition opportunity. This is about action and taking action. And one of the people who's taking action is Alicia Keys.
Ready?
Ready.
I've given birth to 2 humans. I know the pain and the joy of childbirth. Every year, over 2,000 women in America give birth while in prison. I think to myself, what if I was in prison while pregnant? What if I was put in solitary confinement? What if I was not given the health care I needed? What if the male guards were allowed to watch me in the bathroom? What if I was moved to a prison hundreds of miles from my children, making it virtually impossible for them to visit? What if I had to choose between buying tampons or paying for the fees to call my child? What if I had to give birth while being shackled and chained to a bed? What if we decided as a society that this is not okay? What if we helped do something about it?
How's everybody doing today? Good. So let me just start out by thanking all of you for being here. My name is Michael Mendoza and I work with Cut 50. And I'm very, very honored and privileged to be up here with these amazing women. You know, as you just seen in the video and if we just heard from Van Jones, there's so much that we need to do to really fix the conditions within the prisons for our women who are currently incarcerated. And let me just start by saying this, that women are the largest growing population within our prisons right now. Think about that. They are the largest growing population within our prisons. That's not good. So we're going to hear today from these amazing women about their experiences while incarcerated. We are all formerly incarcerated up here, so it's really a great pleasure that we are being supported. But even more so for the women, I'm going to start out by introducing each one of them. We have Amy Ralston Pulba, who is the president of Can Do Foundation. Let's give her a round of applause. And we have Shonioux Williams, who is an ARC member as well as an ally of Cut 50. We have Tiffinay Johnson, who we should also congratulate for her new position as co-director of A New Way of Life for Reentry. And as you just heard, we have Stacey, Jewell, an amazing poet, playwright, and activist. So again, I just really want to thank you women for being here today, for the courage that you are showing and really being able to educate the public on what we need to really do. And so I just want to start off by first asking a question as to what your prior experiences were like before you were incarcerated. One of the things that we need to be mindful of is that 90% of women who are incarcerated have experienced sexual assault. 90%. And so, Amy, if you can share a little bit about what your prior experiences to incarceration was like.
Is this on? Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's never been part of my dialogue and my activism as somebody who advocates clemency for all nonviolent drug offenders. That's what CAN DO stands for, to talk about my own past, but with the Me Too movement and the new court of public opinion being in favor of women who are speaking out finally, I had a situation where I was recently at home with my parents, and my mom was reading an article, and the article was slanted, and she finished this article and she said, some of these women are falsely accusing these men. And I turned to her, and for the first time in my life, and this was only a few months ago, I said, maybe even a little harshly, because I had protected her from this information, that I looked at her and I said, I lost my virginity in a date rape in college. And when I think about why it took me so long to finally open up, and that's what Me Too is all about, the core essence seems to be that women are protectors. That's why we don't talk about it. That's why I never told my mother. That's why we shield, we protect the men, we protect our children, we bring life into the world. And it's time's up, to start talking about this. I've gotten into a few arguments with women who've said, why drudge up the past? We can't change the future unless we talk about the past. Then I've had time to look at the pattern that I myself have engaged in with my choices in men. And I met somebody who was charming, but ultimately very manipulative. And I ended up in prison serving 24 years due to the conspiracy law based on things that he had done. And the conspiracy law transfers guilt and makes you responsible for their actions if you do not cooperate. These are misogynistic laws, they're misogynistic policies at the federal level, they're also used at the state level to force women to cooperate. And I don't want to get into my story, I want to stay on point, but I didn't care what they did to me. I was not going to work with the feds who bust into my home, ransacked it, threw me in a chair and said, you will either work with us or you're looking at 20 to life for conspiracy. My husband had been arrested in Germany. He was involved in manufacturing ecstasy, but we had separated. We had separated over a year. I even moved to LA to get away from him in Texas, and there I was. I found myself in this situation. I think that we have to really understand the broad picture, is that we can't fix something unless we know about it. And women in prison have been left out of the dialogue, and still maybe even a little bit with the Me Too movement. And that's why I want to speak up, I think all of us, and we have to bring their stories. And I promise you, and we'll cover that a little bit, women in prison are some of the most vulnerable women when it comes to male guards and the activity that goes on in there and is covered up.
Thank you, Amy.
Again, my name is Shonioux. Can you hear me this time? So, my backstory, I began to be molested at the age of 2. by a cousin in my family, and it went on from there. At the age of 3, I started being molested by my stepdad. And I say all that to say that due to the sexual trauma that I experienced, I became very angry, very violent. I stayed getting suspended from school for fighting, not because these kids typically were doing anything to me, but I just had a sense to protect myself. I didn't tolerate being bullied or being teased. I couldn't fight my abusers, so I fought kids. I fought people, that I felt were attacking me, and I felt I was protecting myself. So I had this tough girl persona my entire life. Unfortunately, some people were possibly even scared of me a lot of the time. And so going into high school, I very rarely dated. I didn't experience dating much. When I turned 18, I got into a relationship. I believed I was in love, all of those beautiful things, and it was great at first, and then I started being abused in that situation. He started beating me unconscious, pulling my hair out, blacking my eyes, busting my lip, just you name it, dragging me outside naked. And I'm 18 years old when all this started, and due to the sexual traumas and things that I went through as a child and the abuse I went through at home, I ended up in foster care at 14. So when I went into that relationship with him at 18, I was what was known as aged out of foster care. So I didn't have a different route. I didn't have someone else to live with. I didn't have any family members or friends. I found myself feeling I had to stay in that relationship to keep shelter, to keep a roof over my head, because previous to meeting him, and going into the relationship with him, there was often times where I slept in parks or I slept in my car. So I subjected myself to the abuse to protect myself, to have a form of shelter, but also because I felt it was normal in a sense. I grew up abused, so it didn't really seem that difficult to me. Each time I changed the story. I'm like, oh, as long as he's not blacking my eye. And then when he started blacking my eyes, it's like, okay, as long as he's not, knocking me unconscious. And he started knocking me unconscious. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, as long as he's not, doing this. Ultimately, I did get tired of it. He was convicted of a misdemeanor of domestic violence after being on the run for felony domestic violence, for beating me unconscious. Some neighbors calling the police. We were both arrested because when the police arrived, I refused to tell them anything. I stepped to the side with the officers. I told them I don't have anywhere else to live. At this time I was roughly 20. I told them I don't have anywhere else to live. So they're like, well, you have to tell us exactly what he did or we're taking you to jail. And so I'm crying and I'm like, well, I can't because I don't have anywhere else to live. To me, of course, I'm telling you what happened, but I can't exactly tell you what happened. So from there, what ended up happening was we were both arrested. I spent 3 days in jail for that situation. We both got released. A warrant went out for his arrest sometime later. Charges were filed. And then on my 21st birthday, same similar incident, beat me unconscious, dragged me through an alley. Some people called the police. And so I always had to remember my 21st birthday like that. So I thought that was it for me. At that time when the police came, I was willing to tell what happened. So he went to jail. I didn't. He was cut a deal to, instead of 2 felony domestic violences, he got a misdemeanor domestic violence. He served 9 days. He was sentenced to 365 days of domestic violence courses in that time. He never completed them. He was given a plea bargain and was given 6 months in jail. He ultimately did 2. He got out with all these promises. Oh, I'm going to be changed. I'm not going to do this no more, do that anymore. Somewhere in there, we start dating again until one day we were having an argument and he busted my lip open. And I knew that day was it for me because I had went through everything else with him. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. I'm tired of being someone's victim. And I tried to run out of the apartment, and I did run, but he chased me, and he choked me out in a field that was behind my house. And he told me that he would kill me and bury me right there, and no one would ever know. And I ultimately believed him because I didn't have a relationship with my family. So I felt no one would know what he had did to me. No one would probably find out for a while that I was dead. So I ended our relationship there. There was a restraining order in place, a non-negative contact, due to the conviction that he had. So because of that, I started actually enforcing that. I started telling him he couldn't come to my house. He had to stay away from me. He didn't accept any of those things that I was saying. He would bust the windows out of my car, bust the windows out of my house. I would continuously call the police. They would arrive on the scene and say, well, it was misdemeanor actions. They didn't see him committing these crimes, so the worst they could do is just go ahead and submit a police report. It was up to the DA to pick it up. DA never picked these incidents up, not one single time. That was all in 2013. So ultimately in 2014, December 1st, 2014, we went through an incident where we were at a mutual establishment. He was drunk, accusing me of being in a relationship with someone. I had not had any contact with this man physically or anything like that for a rough year and a half. And ultimately I tried to leave that establishment. He broke the window out of my car. I was seatbelted in my car. He broke the window out of my car and beat me unconscious. So when I came to conscious, I called the police. Police arrived. We were both arrested. They said they could not determine who the aggressor was. So it was really traumatic for me because I'm sitting here with this long, beautiful hair. All my hair was ripped out on the left side of my head, bleeding. My right eye was black. I had knots all on my face, lip all busted, and I was in in county jail getting a mugshot taken. And I thought that was the worst that would happen to me. I began to battle suicide really bad. I had contacted the National Domestic Violence Hotline, a lot of different things, trying to find resources and help, trying to move, trying to get help, and ultimately I was denied because I was looked at as now a suspect of domestic violence because we were both arrested. Although I didn't do anything, we were both arrested as suspects and victims. Ultimately, when the DA did pick up the case, they didn't prosecute him with anything. They cut him a deal that if he testified against me that I assaulted him, that I would go to prison. And I didn't understand what all that meant. I thought it was a scare tactic. I thought they were just trying to get me to plead out to something. And however, this was the truth. I was facing 7 years in prison. I'd never been in juvenile hall before. The only other previous arrest I had was, the previous time he had beat me up and I didn't tell. I was educated, had a bachelor's degree, so I'm just thinking that all this stuff isn't true. Ultimately, I got sentenced to 2 years. I went to a jury trial. There was a lot of evidence missing in my case. I went to a jury trial again, and I was found guilty, and I was sentenced to 2 years with half. So I was sent to state prison. My first time being locked up, my first time doing any hard time, and ultimately that just created more and more trauma on top of my life and my lively experiences, and so I'm here today.
Thank you, Shonioux.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Tiffinay. Listening to this wonderful poem, knowing that it was part of a life story, and listening to these women that I'm just meeting is really doing something to my heart and my emotions. So, in 1994, I took a plea bargain for 15 to life for second-degree murder for the very first time being incarcerated at any level. My backstory to that is, at 5 years old, on my 5th birthday, my mother, who was a party woman back in the 60s, 70s, when drugs was introduced into our community, the drugs on war, she got caught up in that. But on my 5th birthday, she had forgot it was my birthday. And she woke up that morning and panic-stricken, okay, I gotta get her something. I am the 3rd of 4 children. She went out to go get me a birthday present, and when she came back with an armful of presents and a man. This man was a senior citizen, and he was not my nationality. He was white. I became his special little girl that very day.
Oh.
And so he wooed me. He primed me. Basically, in essence, he bribed me. And over a short course of time, we began having intimate relationships at 5.
Wow.
That intimate relationship, almost on a daily basis, went on for 5 years. In the course of those 5 years, not only was I a target for him, and I say relationship, and I'll explain it in a minute, what I mean by that, right? But in the course of those 5 years of me having sexual relations with this senior citizen, many other people, I became a victim of them, sexually. When I turned 10 years old, I became physically a woman, right, with her menstrual cycle. That is when he decided, once my mother, made the announcement to the whole family and everything, that, she's on her cycle, we gotta watch her, we gotta make sure nothing happens to her, unbeknownst to you, Mom. I lost my virginity at 5. So he heard that, and so he became panic-stricken. And he says, we can't do this no more, as if I had an option. But we can't do this no more because we will not be able to explain you having a biracial child. Not because I was 5 years old when you started, not because I'm 10 years old now, but because that child would have been born biracial. All right? After he stopped, my psyche took over and completely wiped that away from my memory. All right? I now look back at it as if I was grieving because I had been stripped of this love that he can only show me, this tainted stuff, this secret, right? The gifts, the presents, all of that stuff that people as adults we do have a relationship was put into that. It took me a long time to see it like that. Right? Very long time. A lot of work. But I had to do that once I was incarcerated. So when my psyche took over and took away that memory, at some point in my adult life, with another situation where he was going to be involved with the next generation. All right? Brought all my stuff back up. And when it came up, I'm like, that didn't happen to me. All these pictures. And I see things vividly in my mind. I have to paint a picture even when I'm having a conversation in order for me to grasp something. And so that led me on a drug path because I couldn't conceive these memories was real. So I had to numb them, I had to get them away, I had to do something, as we all do, who enter in and run from stuff that we don't understand. By the time I went to prison, I had 4 children, none of which is his. But I started having children at a very young age because I was used to having sex. That was just what it was. That was my life. That's how I showed affection. That's how I was taught from a very young age. At the teachable age, at the age where you learn and you soak up everything that is going to be the direction of your life. So I was taught to behave and act and do this and do that to get what I want. That was the way you showed. So I have 4 children. I love my children. I didn't plan any of them, like a lot of people do. You know, where it's the most beautiful thing to plan. In the movies, that's what they say, you know. But in my life, that's not what it was. Right before I went to prison, I got pregnant again. I have a set of twins and then 4. And I got pregnant, and got pregnant with another set of twins. At this point in my life, I was homeless, living in and out with my mom and my sister. Now, my mom is still in this relationship with this man. He has not gone nowhere in my family. All right? And in that, just know that this one pregnancy, these babies were conceived at 2 different times, 2 weeks apart. I had to make a decision. Do I keep them or not? It became to a point where I couldn't keep them. I couldn't even take care of the ones that I had. So many complications with that I almost died. In 6 weeks' time, I had 3 abortions for that one pregnancy. A week later is when I committed my crime after a fight with him and my mom. And I took his life. It was either his or mine. And so I turned myself in thinking that if I just go and tell the truth, I know I did something that wasn't bad. I took a life. But they'll understand if I just give them the backstory, if I just tell them what happened to me, right? I was facing the death penalty, and then I was tricked into taking a 15 to life plea bargain. So I did 16 and a half years on a 15 to life, came home 2010, April 28th, and that is my front story.
Wow. I just want to say that I already love these women right here so much right now because I actually had the ability, and it wasn't the ability, it was a miracle chance that I avoided actual incarceration. And I did want to mention that because I would be the only one on the panel who did not have full incarceration. Did I have experiences with police officers prior? Absolutely. Did I have to do immeasurable sexual favors to make sure that I didn't leave those handcuffs on? Absolutely. Did I have SWAT team run in on me in a hotel room with other victims of sex trafficking, with our trafficker being removed and charged with murder because one of the girls passed away, was killed? Did I have, SWAT team and the guns and they're in our faces and we're clearly victims at this time when they came in, put handcuffs on us and ask us sexual things and require us to do sexual favors with SWAT team after the detectives left so that we didn't get locked up? Yes, absolutely. Did I have to go pick up girls from jail all the time that were in the same victimization family as we are? It's called a stable when a pimp or a trafficker takes girls and puts them and gathers them. We're all victims, but did I have to pick them up from jail and deal with them crying because they had to take their wigs off and couldn't wear and didn't have their hair a certain way? Yes, I absolutely experienced all of those things. And I remember sitting there feeling guilty that I avoided incarceration. When I look at my sisters who didn't, who were absolutely raped every night, who were absolutely forced into this lifestyle and were raped by police officers as well have to then go into the jail, and I didn't go. So, you know, my experiences, what you heard in the spoken word piece, you know, I was kidnapped. I was actually held at gunpoint and told that I was going to be a hoe or my child was going to die. And so I chose to be a hoe than to have my life threatened and my child's life threatened. And I was lied to about this being a choice, because you realize that a lot of the things that you think are your choices that weigh heavy on you, that the justice system says it is you, were not choices at all. You were defending yourself. You were trying to save someone else's life. You were, you know, trying to be honorable sometimes. Trying to be honorable and say, look, I did this, but, you know. And so my experiences really are all of our experiences. We were hurt, we were hurt, we were damaged, we were abused, we were used, and when we finally stood up to it, this is what we received. So.
Thank you. Thank you for courageously just sharing all of that with us. I want to say that it's very, very important that we understand what life is like for women before they are incarcerated. Because if we understand the trauma, then we need to start realizing that these are the women that we're sending into an institution that, one, is not gender responsive. Where we are allowing men to strip search women, to pat women down, to be in the same locations where women are at their most vulnerable during showers, when they're using the restroom, and that is not okay. There are many instances within the prison system where there can be so many triggers that will trigger those past traumas. And instead of being rehabilitated, you are being victimized again. And so it's very important that we understand that when we want to come up with more solutions, or we want to change that, to understand that most women within our institutions do have a very traumatic past. As a man growing up myself in the prison system, and when you are strip searched, fully enclosed, that is very indignifying in and of itself. So I can even imagine even much more so for a woman who has experienced such a traumatic past. So thank you once again for the courage of sharing that with us. And so next, what I want to kind of get into is once you find yourself within the prison system, could you share a little bit with us about what the experiences are like when you are triggered in those situations?
Focus on it. With the remedies, I just very, very briefly want to say one of the things that happened when I was in Dublin was that one of the guards was popping the door open at a detention center and letting male prisoners have access to the women.
What?
Amnesty International, it was a big scandal. Amnesty International did a scathing report on it. And do you know what the remedy was? After that, the federal prisons stopped allowing the media to have access to us.
What?
So one of the, you cannot. You can get into state and interview state, but you cannot, they will not allow video cameras, and they almost deny the media to have access to us. I think that's a remedy, and getting men out of our personal spaces. They can be guards, but get out of our personal spaces. And we have, I think that's two remedies that I can identify.
Thank you, Amy.
Again, my name is Shonioux Williams. You'll hear a lot more from me. What I didn't say was I was just released from prison November 8th, 2017. So I've only been home 2 months, and I'm actively moving because this is something that needs to stop, and it's something that needs to change. Once you get involved, you will never look back. It is very traumatic, but we can make a difference. So I am a member of ARC, which is Anti-Recidivism Coalition. You guys please look into them. They do great work for us incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. That's headed up by Scott Budnick. Many of you may have heard of that in this area. And then I'm also partnered with Cut 50. Cut 50 is the one sponsoring this Dignity Women's campaign. Please look them up. That's hashtag cut and then 50. And again, the goal is to cut the prison population, and just population as a whole of incarceration down by 50% in all 50 states. So please join us and just get a part of it. I hope that what you heard today inspired you. We didn't just pour out just to pour out. We poured out because we believe that you guys are a community, a voice that can help us in the movement that we're doing. So please look into it. All of these websites are available, Instagrams, Facebooks. Thank you.
So my name is Tiffinay Johnson. I'm former lifer. I'm former resident of a New Way of Life Reentry Project. So the organization that I am now co-director over is the organization I came home to. So what we do is we have homes for women who are coming directly out of incarceration, whether it's jail, prison, boot camp, whatever. We accept them and we treat them with respect. We help in whatever way in connecting resources to them, to us, for making a smooth transition back into the community, right? We also do litigation, expungements, free of charge to the community. We have 2 expungement clinics. We have 5 lawyers who do that. We do advocacy work, policy work. We have a Women Organizing for Justice and Opportunity Leadership Lab where the requirement, you must be formally incarcerated to be a part of this. And right now we're focusing on the DCFS system where the babies are going into and then going to be in that cycle of all these cycles that we and many other women, thousands of other women are going through, right? And so we have our all of us are none. We have many things, but the founder, Susan Burton, made this happen over 20 years ago. If it wasn't for her and her passion for just having a house for a few women to go to, if it wasn't for that, a lot of us, over 1,000 women, over 300 children have been through the home, received the services, went back into the community, and is building their life. And she just wrote a memoir. So it's out, Becoming Miss Burton. Please check it out. And she's doing a national tour everywhere. And then everywhere she goes, she's going to visit the prisons to see the women. We got special print, 11,000 copies to go in there to give to the women because her story, my story, your story, and all our women's stories are the same but yet different. And what do we do with them?
You can reach me at whoisstolen.com. Again, it's whoisstolen.com. And what I have is a creative arts troupe, right? Made up of survivors of human trafficking and advocates of human trafficking, those who have been incarcerated and those who have not. And we basically come together and we use the creative arts to tell our story all over the world. I have a play called 7 Layers Captive that I take all over the country, which is my story about being kidnapped and abducted, and then my story of triumph and how I was gotten out of it. But I also collaborate with other survivor and advocate artists, and we come together and we put on performances. In Amsterdam, we had a performance called Confessions of a Prostitute, where victims of human trafficking or silenced over there can use their voices through the performing arts, because one thing I know for sure is a reality, is that art is never silenced. Thank you.
Thank you for incarcerated women. Please give these great women a round of applause.